Hello, critical thinkers. We are live. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Oh, critical thinkers, my apologies. Had some issues. The powers that be do not want me to do this live stream tonight. So my apologies for the crash. Hopefully it won't happen again. Hopefully everybody's doing well tonight. Tonight's going to be a little bit of a doozy. We have some Robert Brooks updates, some new, some courtroom news. So hang tight for that. Let me turn down this music. Okay. So again, hopefully all is well. Quick commercial. If everyone can please do me a favor, if y'all could please like the stream, share it, comment below, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It greatly helps with the algorithm. So tonight we're going to be going over some Robert Brooks court updates. So for everyone that is unaware, we have a total of 10 criminal defendants. One has already been sentenced, in which he received 1 year conditional discharge. And we have a second defendant who is going to be sentenced on August 8th, I believe. So we have a couple of defendants who went to court on the 15th of July and then yesterday on the 16th. So I'm going to be covering the stories of David Kingsley and Matthew Galliher. Matthew Galliher appeared in court today, and David Kingsley appeared in court yesterday. So how this is going to be structured tonight is this. I'm going to show you a news video covering the appearance of David Kingsley, and then afterward I'm going to be going over two articles. The first one goes over David Kingsley and what occurred in court, and the second one is what happened with Matthew Galliher yesterday. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up a video now, but if everyone could please do me a favor, please like the stream, share it, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. So I'm going to pull up this video now, and we will take a look at it together, and I will comment. And by all means, feel free to comment in the chat as well for everyone who's watching along. City. Okay, give me 1 second. Here we go. Okay.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us here on Eyewitness News. I'm Thomas Payeur. This week will be a busy one at the Oneida County Courthouse, where former correctional officers are scheduled to appear in Judge Michael Bauer's courtroom for their pretrial hearings. While cameras are not being allowed inside the courtrooms, Eyewitness News.
Okay. Obviously, I had to pause it there. For everyone who saw my thumbnail in which it said no cameras allowed, this was a big shock to me in terms of no cameras were allowed to record the proceedings. Now, for me, there is no reason for this. There's no reason for these pretrial proceedings not to be televised. This is very, very discouraging that that the general public is not allowed to see these proceedings and know exactly what is happening. Instead, we have to rely on reporters that are actually in the courthouse themselves to tell us what's happening. So I'm very, very disgruntled. I'm very disappointed that there are no cameras recording what's occurring in the courtroom. That's a big disappointment. That, for me, hopefully is not foreshadowing the level of malarkey and bullshit that we will see in the upcoming proceedings and in the trial that was set for October 6th. So I'm hoping that's not the case, but let's see. I am discouraged that there is no footage, there is no recording of what's occurring in the courtroom.
News reporter Kayla Bruce was at the courthouse earlier this evening to break down how today's hearings went.
After a month-long break, we are back in court for the case of Robert Brooks. Now today before Judge Robert Bauer, we had suppression hearings where the courts are determining what evidence can be used at trial. Of the 3 defendants that will be seen this week for the hearings, we saw one, David Kingsley. Kingsley, who was indicted for the top charge of murder, was seen in court today. 2 witnesses were called to stand representing the New York State Police, as both serve as investigators who searched and seized the property of David Kingsley on December 13th, which was only 4 days after the death of Robert Brooks. Both testified today on their process of receiving different items, including the uniform of David Kingsley, and how they both performed audio recordings during the process.
So David Kingsley, defense attorney, is trying to get pieces of evidence thrown out of court. So this is a very common tactic. Even if defense attorneys don't believe they have a strong chance of getting specific pieces of evidence thrown out, they will attempt to do so. But there's something important that Kayla's going to bring up. So let's take a listen to that.
They also gave details as to the process of reading David Kingsley his Miranda rights as they went through his property and interviewed him later at the Watertown Police Barracks.
So one quick thing, we know that David Kingsley did speak to state investigators. He did speak to the state police. So, and this is one thing that's in dispute in terms of David Kingsley being read his Miranda rights, and whether the statements that David Kingsley said, whether they would be allowed to be admitted into court.
One witness recalled Kingsley sharing that he never touched Robert Brooks outside of him performing CPR. Now, Judge Bauer reserved.
Now, we know this is the biggest crock of BS in terms of what David Kingsley said. David Kingsley had told the state police that he had never touched Robert Brooks outside of performing CPR. And we know this is not the case. We know this is not the case because we have the video, but ultimately it's very probable that David Kingsley didn't believe that the body cam video would be available as evidence. Now, why is David Kingsley, defense attorney, trying to have this statement be removed, not admitted? There's something called consciousness of guilt. Consciousness of guilt is when you have a defendant who takes an action or makes a statement and says something that points to the individual's guilt. It doesn't mean that that's a smoking gun, but it's very suspicious. So consciousness of guilt is typically categorized as circumstantial evidence. In this case, you had David Kingsley, who told state investigators, who lied and said that he never touched Robert Brooks outside of CPR. That is what we call consciousness of guilt, a consciousness of guilt statement that he made to preserve himself.
His decision on whether or not he'll use this evidence at court, along with his decision as to separating David Kingsley's trial from his co-defendants as defense attorneys requested.
Also, some of these defendants are looking to be separated from their co-defendants. This act is not uncommon. This happens in many criminal cases. Some of you may have had, if you were involved in the criminal justice system, you may have had co-defendants. And if you had your own private attorney, your private attorney may have recommended that the cases be severed and that there be separate trials.
But to get things started, Judge Bauer set a pretrial conference for September 22nd, where we can expect Kingsley to be right back in court. And we'll hopefully hear more details on Judge Bauer's decision.
By the way, if you believe it's wrong for Judge Bauer not to allow recording, not to allow cameras in these proceedings, please write that in the chat. If you believe it's wrong, write wrong in the chat. If you believe it's right, write right. So either it's wrong or right. So do me a favor, for everyone who's in the chat now, please give me your opinion. Let me know if you believe that it's okay for these recordings, for these pretrial hearings not to be recorded. Because for me, it's an absolute disgrace that the public cannot see these proceedings.
As we inch closer to trial, jury selection will begin on October 6th. We'll be back in court tomorrow where we'll hear from co-defendant Matthew Galliher and then
Okay, so at the moment, Judge Bauer has set a trial date of October 6th. October 6th is going to be the beginning of jury selection. If there are severed, so if these cases are severed, if these defendants are able to get their own individual trials, we will have multiple trial dates. There will be multiple jury selections and stuff of that nature. So as of now, it's one trial. And there was one thing that Kayla mentioned, that at the moment, Judge Bauer has reserved his decision. Basically means that he has not made a decision to grant the motions of suppression as of now. So he's going to make this decision later on. So for those of you who don't know, I had put out a YouTube short with the court dates for all of the other Robert Brooks defendants. So it's possible from now up until October 6th, during that time, he will have decisions on the suppression hearings. So I'm going to pull down this video, and that's what we have. Unfortunately, I would have loved to show you the actual the actual proceedings themselves, but unfortunately, we cannot watch these proceedings. Cameras have not been allowed. For me, it's an absolute layer of BS. There's no reason why these proceedings should not be recorded. I cannot think of a reason why. If you can think of a reason why these proceedings should not be recorded, type that in the chat. Please type that in for me. Okay, we have BJ Webbs who said, I feel it's very wrong for not allowing recordings. They don't deserve protection or privacy. Richard Seller says, I've watched all this circus and he acts before each session, and no one ever says no to TV or camera coverage. Yes, that's the good point, Richard. Typically at the beginning of each appearance, the judge will ask about this. So I don't know where this is coming from. There are several reporters, one from the Observer Dispatch, and a few other, local media outlets. I believe Casey Pritchard is one. Sean Mills is another. They've been covering these proceedings and covering what's occurring with Robert Brooks. If they have an answer, if you have an answer, please let me know why cameras were not allowed in the courtroom. It's absolutely despicable, in my opinion. Despicable. We have Al Razak who says, I didn't see David Kingsley in the video attempt any CPR. I saw him and that effing Anzalone holding his face and neck. Maybe I missed something. Maybe I saw the wrong video. Al, you did not see. Al, you saw the video. I did not see in all of the body cam footage. There's 4 body cam footage that the Attorney General released. I did not see CPR performed by David Kingsley. So obviously he was lying to the state investigators, and he was looking to prop himself up. So yeah, that's actually, it's obvious he was holding his neck. So from A to B says transparency. Absolutely, there's no transparency. And I can see in cases where you have children involved, like, for example, I watched the Karen Reed trial, the second trial, and they had, the decedent his niece and nephew who were minors. They testified. They ended up not recording the minor's testimony. That is understandable. In this case, we are not dealing with minors. We're dealing with adults. So I do not see why they're blocking the recordings of these proceedings. It does not make any sense whatsoever. And there is no transparency. And this is very scary because pretrial proceedings are very, very important. Outside of the trial itself, there are decisions on evidence in terms of evidence not being admitted. There's very important things happening that need to be included, that the public needs to see. So yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible. Okay, and we have Al who says there were 8 videos that the AG put out. I watched it 12 times. Even my family was like, "Ma, give it a break already. It's Christmas holiday." I told them I can't. Yeah, so for many of you who've watched the Robert Brooks, the body cams, very hard to watch, but you absolutely have to see it because of the brutality that's occurring. And again, this is not an isolated incident. What happened to Robert Brooks has happened to many of men incarcerated in the New York State Department of Corrections. District attorneys refuse to prosecute these correctional officers, and there's a culture of corruption in docks that has been occurring for decades. And hopefully it will be addressed soon. But so we have C note 6319 says they do not televise hearing because all evidence may not be admitted. So C note, I understand what you're saying, but see, my understanding of other cases, that I've seen other cases televised in which there was evidence that was brought up. There was evidence that the defense made motions to throw out, and it wasn't admitted. But it was still documented. It was still televised. So yeah. Um, I'm not quite sure if that's the reason. I could be wrong, but thank you for that comment there. What I want to do now is actually bring up an article to read for you guys and go into more specifics on what occurred in the David Kingsley appearance yesterday. So I'm going to pull this up. And for everyone joining us for the first time, if y'all could please do me a favor, please like this stream, share it, comment, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from. That would be greatly appreciated. Greatly appreciated. Okay, so this article here is from the Observer Dispatch. The author is Casey Pritchard. My apologies, Casey, if I pronounced your last name incorrectly earlier. So Marcy CO back before a judge, jury selection to start in October. David Kingsley, who was charged with second-degree murder and first-degree manslaughter, was back in court on July 15th for his suppression hearing. There is no movement with the Robert Brooks case on July 15th as a former corrections officer allegedly involved was before Judge Robert Bauer and heard the date for his jury selection, October 6th. Just a quick note, for me, this process is taking a long time. Robert Brooks was murdered December 9th. October 6th is the start of jury selection. They're anticipating the trial being 4 weeks. That means the trial could be over in November. And a year, as of now, these correction officers are still walking the streets, not incarcerated. So I'm a little disappointed with the process, with how long this has taken, but that's just me. If you think this is taking that long, please let me know in the chat your comments on whether you think this process is being timely. Okay, let's move back to the article. Brooks, an inmate transferred to Marcy Corrections Facility on December 10th was brutally beaten with his hands cuffed behind his back by corrections officers while in custody. An autopsy was conducted by the Onondaga County Medical Examiner's Office, and in February, Brooks' death was ruled a homicide. David Kingsley, who was charged with second-degree murder and first-degree manslaughter, was back in court July 15th for his suppression hearing, a hearing to determine whether or not certain pieces of evidence can be presented at trial. So because we don't have any camera footage, no recording, we have an account from Casey in terms of what occurred. First two witnesses, attorney Luke Nebesh, representing Kingsley, had put forth a line of questioning towards New York State Police senior investigator Joseph Simpson and New York State Police investigator Christopher Kolosky, asking if either had discussed the Brooks case, posed any questions, or mentioned what they knew to Kingsley. Doing so would have violated Kingsley's right to self-incrimination or his Miranda rights. This all pertained to the People's Evidence, Exhibits 1 and 2, flash drives which contain recorded interactions and interviews with Kingsley. So we know that David Kingsley spoke with the state investigators, and I believe David Kingsley made a mistake, okay? Which a lot of people who interact with law enforcement, they make this mistake. They think that they can outsmart investigators. They think that they can outsmart detectives, and they begin to talk and make statements. So everyone understand that whenever you're involved with the criminal justice system, exercise your right to shut up and obtain legal counsel before you make any statements to law enforcement. Now, one thing that I observed was I think Anthony Farina is one of the biggest demons in this case. But Anthony Farina ended up resigning from his job almost immediately so that he did not have to talk to OSI or state investigators. If I'm mistaken, somebody please correct me. But I don't believe Anthony Farina made statements to state investigators. I could be wrong. But this is why he resigned, because most employers will have something in their employee handbooks or in their collective bargaining agreements that if you're involved in an incident, you have to cooperate with internal investigators. But I digress a little bit. Let's move on back to the article. Nebush asked Simpson if he had been briefed on the incident involving Kingsley, to which he stated he had been. When asked if he knew what Kingsley was going to be relieved as a corrections officer, Simpson indicated that he hadn't known and that Kingsley had mentioned he had been, quote unquote, been walked out. Simpson also indicated while under oath that he had never come across any information of the incident before his interview with Kingsley at the Watertown State Police Barracks, never came across any attorneys, and that he wasn't aware of any conversations that took place with Kingsley that did so. Kolosky echoed Simpson's testimony, saying they first made contact with Kingsley on December 13th, 2024, in an attempt to execute a search warrant of a residence on North Madison and the village of Adams. However, Kingsley wasn't present and was instead called. When advised that Simpson and Kolosky were there to execute a search warrant and recover his uniforms. The interview took place on December 14th, and Kolosky indicated he read Kingsley his Miranda rights before the interview, and that he was not being held, and that he hadn't been told he couldn't leave. So just one thing very quickly in terms of Miranda, whenever you have a situation in which you have a defense attorney mention what's occurring here, it might be a situation where the defense attorney is trying to say, coerce it, that if my client did make these statements, it was because my client was being coerced to make these statements, and that my clients had to make statements to be free. So this is a very important thing during this line of questioning, that it's an attempt to establish that David Kingsley did read his Miranda rights. He was read his Miranda rights, and he was asked questions after he was Mirandized. Let's continue. Kolarski said that he had Kingsley initial a card after being read his Miranda rights before the interview took place. And this is something that's very common. Detectives will have a suspect, sign or initial a card stating that they had their Miranda rights read to them. An inventory of items recovered by the search warrant took place before the interview, lasting around 50 minutes before Kingsley was questioned about the death of Brooks. Excuse me. Kingsley's statements. Kolarski said in his interview with Kingsley said he, quote, came into contact with Brooks, but said he didn't touch Brooks until he performed CPR. Now, going back to what I said earlier, this is very important because this is what we call a consciousness of guilt statement. This was obviously a lie, and this is going to be shown to the jury that Kingsley made these statements because he was looking to protect himself and lie to state investigators. The New York State Police investigator added that Kingsley stated that Brooks walked into the infirmary. This is another lie that is going to be used to show consciousness of guilt. Because we know that Robert Brooks, everyone who saw the video, saw that Robert Brooks did not walk into the infirmary. He was pretty much carried into the infirmary, and he was carried into the infirmary in a position that would cause harm to the body. So David Kingsley did not expect these body cams to be out there. So he lied to state investigators, and William Fitzpatrick, the special prosecutor, and his assistant DAs want to be able to use those statements to incriminate and show consciousness of guilt by David Kingsley. The future of the case, Judge Bauer stated that he was reserving decision on the suppression hearing until a later date. So as we know, reserving decision means that he is going to be making a decision at a later date. He set the pretrial conference for September 22nd, 9:30 a.m., and jury selection is set for October 6th. So that is the end of this specific article. One thing I want to do when someone shows me love, I do want to acknowledge them, and I do want to acknowledge Stephen Lennon, who actually watching is from New Zealand, if I'm seeing that correctly. $2. He says free Palestine. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciated. My apologies if NZ is not New Zealand, but thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. And Stephen, you are the stream sponsor because you are the highest donor. Thank you so much for supporting. I really appreciate that. So we have Sunset who says, thank you, Stephen. We have Al who says, I'm worried about the judge reserving judgment at this time. That's dangerous to me. So Al, basically what this means is that the judge needs more time to make a decision. Honestly, I don't see why he would need more time. He's heard the arguments typically, all depending on the complexity of the motion. I mean, it shouldn't take that long. So we should have a decision. But one thing I said long time ago was that these defense attorneys would use pretrial motions to throw out a lot of the evidence. They would make these attempts. So I'm not really surprised by this. I'm not very surprised. So what I want to do now very quickly, again, I want to thank Stephen again for being the stream sponsor from New Zealand with the $2 super chat. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciated. Thank you for supporting the work. For everyone out there, feel free to like. Doing a like doesn't cost you anything. So tickle that like button, smash it, whatever you want to do. Hit that like button. It immensely helps with the algorithm. Right now, we have about 26 likes. If we're able to get that up to 30, that would be greatly appreciated. So thank you so much. So one thing I want to do now is move to Matthew Galliher. Matthew Galliher had his court appearance yesterday, July 16th. So unfortunately, we do not have, court, recordings of what occurred. So what I want to do is I'm going to read an article for you in terms of what happened. This is, familiar with what happened with Kingsley. Okay. So, and this article is also from Casey Pritchard. Casey's been covering the crap out of the Robert Brooks murder, covering these criminal defendants. So thank you, Casey, for covering this. Greatly appreciated. So here we go. Another Marcy corrections officer allegedly involved in the death of Robert Brooks was before Judge Robert Bauer on July 16th, with jury selection slated for October 6th. Brooks, an inmate transferred to Marcy Corrections Facility on December 10th, was brutally beaten with his hands cuffed behind his back by corrections officers while in custody. An autopsy was conducted by the Onondaga County Medical Examiner's Office, and in February, Brooks' death was ruled a homicide. Galliher, who was charged with second-degree murder, first-degree manslaughter, and second-degree gang assault, was back in court on July 16th for his suppression hearing. The hearing was on the validity of the audio-video recording of Galliher's interview with police. So again, we're seeing a similar motion to dispute entering into evidence Galliher's interview with the state police. We just hope that the state police, they crossed their T's and they dotted their I's when dealing with these correction officers, because I'm afraid that they will find some BS to get these pieces of evidence thrown out. I'm hoping that's not the case, but let's see what else happened. Galliher's attorney, Kevin Lubrand, questioned New York State Police senior investigator Adam Haggs as to his interview of Galliher on December 13th, 2024. Following a search warrant on December 13th to recover clothing and items issued to Galliher as part of his position as a corrections officer for the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, Galliher was asked to come to the New York State Police Barracks in Marcy. By the way, I don't call DOCS New York State Department of Corrections. I call them the New York State Department of Corruption and Criminal Sadists. Lou Brand had asked if Galliher had been questioned about the Brooks death during the execution of the search warrant or before the interview, to which he said no. Maggs and Galliher had been explained. Maggs said Galliher had been explained what was being done step by step as officers carried out the search warrant, and that Galliher himself drove to the New York State Police Barracks in Marcy. Maggs added he was the one who read Galliher his Miranda rights. it was indicated that alongside Maggs, an assistant attorney general, and an investigator from the New York State Attorney General's office were present for the interview. I'm going to read that again. It was indicated that alongside Maggs, an assistant attorney general, and an investigator from the New York State Attorney General's office were present for the interview. That's the office of Letitia James. We know that. When asked why they were there, Maggs said that anytime there's a death involving law enforcement, the New York State Attorney General's office is involved in the investigation. We know that the Attorney General's office, they had to recuse themselves, so we know that they're not involved anymore. Following the questioning, Judge Bauer said he was going to reserve the decision to rule and would do so at a later date. Bauer noted that a pretrial conference for Galliher will take place September 22nd, and jury selection will begin October 6th. Additionally, Bauer said that he has yet to rule on whether or not to grant severance to a number of the clients asking for it. If they are granted severance, defendants in the Brooks case would be tried separately from the others involved. So, again, this is something that I have not spoken a lot about, but many of these defendants, they're asking to be tried separately. They feel that it may increase their chances of a not guilty verdict. So that is the end of this article. Unfortunately, I would have hoped I could have shown you footage of what occurred in the courtroom, but there is no video coverage because cameras were not allowed to record these proceedings. Not allowed at all. So for those of you joining us now, I want to thank you for being here. If you guys can please do me a favor, like the video, comment. If anything, let me know where you're watching from. Share this video, share this live stream. YouTube is not very, giving to content creators who cover this kind of content. So if y'all could please do me a favor and push this content out there to the masses, it would be greatly, greatly appreciated. So one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to come on and chit chat with me. I would love to hear what you have to say. So I'm putting a link in the chat now. So it's up there. So if anybody wants to come on and chit chat with me, feel free to click on that link. The only thing I do ask is that you share your camera. No loud music in the background. I do not want to get a copyright strike. And I encourage people who disagree with me to come on. So if you have a difference of opinion, you disagree with me, I would love to hear from you first. If you don't, if you want to come on and let me know what you think about what's happening. Do you think it's fair that there's no cameras being allowed to record these proceedings? Do you think it's fair? Are you happy with how long this process has taken? For me, this process has taken too long. I don't agree with how long this process is taken. This should be a lot quicker than this. So if you do click on that link, you have to click on allow StreamYard to share your allow them to share, get access to your camera, your microphone, and you have to click on Enter Studio. I cannot see anyone who's back in the studio unless you click on Enter Studio. Okay. So one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take a look at a couple of these comments here, and see if anybody wants to come on. So we have Sunset who said, I wonder if paying for private attorneys, etc., could result in bankruptcy. For some of these defendants, it might. I'm not exactly sure. I do know at the start of these proceedings, a couple of these defendants had public defenders or could not make bail immediately. So, everyone's financial situation is different. We have Sean. Sean says, for we as a nation to allow oath takers to lie in duties is the simplest of keys to Pandora's box. I agree with you. I agree with you whatsoever. We have to hold our law enforcement accountable. In fact, I'm working on a video covering covering Long Island Audit. If you're not familiar with that channel, Long Island Audit is a channel. They're First Amendment advocates. They film themselves going to police stations, and anyway, I'm working on a video in which you have a police officer, a state trooper, spit in the face of a journalist. Not very nice. So I'll go over a couple of comments. We have Anne, who says, thank you for covering this case. Justice for Robert Brooks. I agree with you 1,000%. I want to see justice. I'm beginning to get a little bit discouraged. And it says courts are always backed up. You might be right. You might be right. So this process seems like it's taking a long time. Bet there might be a backlog in court cases. So Anne may be right. Anne may be right. And also says accountability is needed. Big problem in America now. So Anne, I see your image is Free Karen Reed. That's another example of a lack of accountability. Police officers not being held accountable, allowed to run amok. And so thankfully, Karen Reed was acquitted on everything except basically driving under the influence. So I'm glad Karen Reed is free. Sunset says Long Island Audit is an interesting channel. It is a very interesting channel. So in any event, I want to send a special thank you to Stephen for being the stream sponsor from New Zealand. Stephen, thank you for supporting the channel. I greatly, greatly appreciate that. It really means a lot when I have support. So thank you. For those of you who are unable to financially support the channel, feel free to just like the stream, like the video, share it. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Many of you watch my videos, and a lot of you haven't subscribed to the channel. So let's make it official. Put a ring on it, subscribe to the channel, and when you click on subscribe, hit on the bell notification icon and click on select all so that you'll be notified when all of my videos come out and when I come live on air. So again, Stephen, thank you so much for supporting the work. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. It really means a lot. So I really don't have anyone in the back now, and that's okay. I'm gonna, begin to shut it down and end the stream. So as I say in all of my videos, thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting the channel. My goal is to go deeper than what the mainstream media is telling and sharing with you. So everyone, take care. God bless you, and I will see you next time. Take care.